Okay, hello everyone. This is my first time I will deliver my presentation. We are not used to, because we are not used to self-select ourselves. So that's why me and Ron was never included in the pool. But we had a defiance from the last presenters that did not show up. So there is a backup presentation that is mine. And I hope you will enjoy. It's a presentation about IS-IS between, yes, IS-IS. IS-IS between RudderOS and other vendors. I don't know if some of you is using IS-IS between RudderOS and other brands. No one? Amazing. Okay, so probably will be interesting. I already delivered this presentation in Italy with Federico and Marco Paesani, and this part are the original slides, just translated in English, of course. And we will talk briefly about IS-IS protocol, because the purpose is not to train you about IS-IS, but IS-IS between other vendors. Then IS-IS by MikroTik, so the implementation in RudderOS, and the testing. I am Lorenzo, you know me, so I can skip and save time for the other things. These are the partners that collaborate with me to build this presentation. They are experts on Huawei and Juniper. That's why we did this presentation together. Federico and Marco Paesani, they are consultants in Italy. And I asked them to present these materials here. And you will find also a lot of pictures shot by Marco Paesani. He likes to make pictures in Italy. And hints of the IS-IS protocol. It is intermediate system to intermediate system. It is an intra-domain routing exchange protocol. Integrated IS-IS is an extension of the IS-IS protocol for the routing in a mixed environment IP OSI, based by the RFC 1195, written in the December 1990. The title of the RFC, because I read a lot of these things inside, is use of the OSI IS-IS for routing in TCP IP and dual environment. And the comparison should be done with what? OSPF. OSPF is the protocol mostly used as a EGP protocol. And IS-IS in the last year make more success instead of OSPF. OSPF exists in two different versions, version 2 and version 3. Version 2 was bring by RFC 2178 in the April 1998, and OSPF v2 is for IPv4 only. And version 3, released in 2008, is for IPv6 only. So you can see from this slide that IS-IS is older than OSPF. And why is modern now? What's the things? Because IS-IS work in a different way instead of OSPF. In an OSI network, we can see 4 different entities. The area is a logic entry made by routers and connection we can find inside the area. The areas are connected to build a backbone. In the slide, we can see area 1, area 2, and area 3. The end system, or IaaS, are the hosts that doesn't have routing capabilities. So they are just the host around the network. And then we have the intermediate system, or IS. They are nodes that are having routing capabilities. The one are running IS-IS inside. And a domain is a set of OSI networks that contains a number of areas placed under a single administrative control. First of all, IS-IS it supports ISO, Open System Interconnection, and IPv4, IPv6. So in the same instance, IS-IS will transport both IPv4 and IPv6. This is one of the advantages that we will see later. It's useful for an IGP, Interior Gateway Protocol. It has a link state database, or LSDB. Use the shortest path first algorithm using the Dijkstra algorithm, like OSPF. Have updates, the flooding process, and 2 levels of logical routing. Level 1 is intra-area, so inside one area. And level 2 is routing inter-area, so between areas. IS-IS provides 2 types of LSDB. Level 1, they contain topological information about L1 and L2, L2 ISs of a single area, and are used for determining intra-area paths. Then we have level 2. In this case, the level 2 LSDB contain topological information about the backbone and are used for determining inter-area paths. The relationship between IS types and LSDB types is that L1 have only one L1 LSDB, L2 ISs have only one L2 LSDB, and L1, L2 ISs have one L1 and one L2. We can see in the diagram is there. In the diagram, what you have inter-area and intra-area. L1 intra, L2 inter. Why IS-IS? IS-IS use a single link state advertisement versus OSPF that have 5. IS-IS is a protocol that handles IPv4 and IPv6 in the same instance and is simpler and more efficient. It uses a single routing domain and is faster at converging. So one of the very interesting aspects of IS-IS that it works in layer 2. So you don't need to specify IP addresses on the border router instead of OSPF. And OSPF works at layer 3 versus layer 2 of IS-IS. OSPF need a router ID in IPv4 format, and IS-IS use a system ID in CLNS format. In OSPF, the backbone area is mandatory, the area 0, and all the area should be connected directly or by virtual links. In IS-IS, you have free design, so there is not a flower design with areas aside the backbone area, but you can just deploy areas and interconnect them using L2. OSPF have designated router and backup router, so DR and BDR, and IS-IS have only the designated one, so there is no backup. The LSA updated every 30 minutes in OSPF versus 20 minutes in IS-IS. OSPF have boundary routers, so one router that sits between 2 areas. In IS-IS, we have border routers, one in each area connecting together. Both of the protocols can use BFD, and OSPF support authentication, and IS-IS no. This is, of course, one of the counterside. RouterOS and IS-IS implemented since the RouterOS version 7.13, December 2023, and we delivered this presentation in April, remember. Is currently still configurable by command line interface. There is no Winbox or no webfig for IS-IS still today. is not present, of course, in RudderOS version 6. The implementation is still under development, even it is working. And the first presentation, as I know, was here at MTPC in Prague in February 2024, so 1 year ago. And this is one slide that I took from the Kevin presentation. The difference of the format CLNS between the standard and RudderOS. In the standard is just one variable that contain the address family, area ID, system identifier, and the selector. In RudderOS, the difference is that we can find all the settings, but in different places. So we have just to split the CLNS in single parts and put into the settings. But as I told you, the most interesting part is not the setting, but the working between RudderOS and the other vendors. We did a live test in Bologna that required to bring, of course, all the routers. So we have the Huawei, the Juniper, and 4 RudderOS, 1 CCR, and 3 small client. And unfortunately, I have not them with me right now. And this is the diagram that we used. We made a core of the network. Let me show you here. So we have the CCR, RudderOS. We have a Huawei router and a Juniper router. And this is the IS-IS network. Then we are running BGP VPLS between this network. And so we can obtain different VLANs on the 3 clients in different VLANs, so they can communicate one each other in the separate VLAN with the separate addresses. This is the result. You can find there the versions that we used in the test, and it was done live, and this was the presentation. And this was the presentation that we did in Bologna. But the interesting part is the one after, when we discuss with the technician what happens during the lab. So when we arrange this presentation. And this is the interesting things that I have to tell you now. What happens to make it work? So we discovered a lot of interesting things about the implementations in IS-IS between the vendors. First, we try to connect RudderOS with Juniper, so JunoOS. Connecting the 2 routers together, so RudderOS and Juniper, IS-IS was not working. Why? Federico, the son of the other colleague, made the lab for us and found in the logs of the RudderOS the message IS-IS areas max mismatch. I say, what the hell? I never heard these parameters before. So he checked and we checked on the wiki on MikroTik which kind of parameter is areas max, and there is nothing. Also, in their career of consultants, they have a lot of network running IS-IS, and they never set up this parameter. Okay, finally, we found on the RudderOS CLI that this command exists. Sorry, because it's dark, but areas max exists. We also discovered that we can specify a value there. Okay, but what say Juniper documentation? Sorry. Juniper documentation, you can find the address here and you can search on Google. We stating that about this parameter. There is no other things that we know. Modify the maximum number of IS-IS areas advertised. These values is included in maximum address area field of the IS-IS common PDUs header included in all outgoing PDUs. The maximum number is restricted to 36. and under, you can specify on Juniper the range between 3 to 36. So it is how many areas you can have in your domain. That's it, X areas. The default on Juniper is 3. Okay. So Federico set up max areas 3 on Junos and 3 on RadarOS, but it still doesn't work. Okay, start to use a Wireshark and discover that if you set the 3 on Juniper, the value will be still 0. So specifying 3, the minimum value, is going out 0. Okay? If you specify 4, it will be 4. 5 will be 5, and so on. But specifying 3 is 0. Okay, no chance to obtain 3. Okay, Federico set up nothing on Juniper and 0 on RadarOS, and IS-IS start to work between Juniper and RadarOS. But it's not finished. We have another vendor. Now is Huawei turn. Okay, we solved the Juniper part, now Huawei. Start to connect RadarOS with Huawei and did not work again. Okay, now we have the experience about this parameter, so we know where to look for. And take a look of the Huawei documentation. It states, hey guy, you can't set up nothing on Huawei. The maximum is 3. The value is 0, but the maximum is 3. So you can do nothing. And this starts the pain, okay. On Huawei, the maximum area address is defined as, it's a fixed value of 0, indicating that a maximum of 3 area addresses are supported. So I have a colleague in Brazil that is a trainer in Huawei things, and I asked him, hey, come on, what is going? Oh, we never set up this parameter. I know, you can't. And everything, it works. And that's it. But when I show him this definition, he say, what the hell? It doesn't make a sense. So basically, this is how Huawei is managing this parameter. Will accept 0 and 3, but in the output is 3. Okay, and sorry, make the same slide. Okay, Federico set up areas max to 3 on RadarOS instead of 0 with Juniper, and it works now with Huawei. But where is the trick? The trick is our goal was to interconnect 2 different vendors with RadarOS in the same network. Okay, the mysterious parameters, areas max, is possible to set up on RadarOS and Juniper only. Huawei have no settings. And this parameter, about this parameter, we asked to everybody, even in the conference, and no one know that exists this parameter. No one know. And I will also challenge you all, the present in this conference, and the one we look in YouTube one day. If you have something to tell us, we are here to hear you, because it is a very mysterious parameters. These parameters can be set up in the instance in the IS-IS in RadarOS. So if you want to build a network, you can set up 2 different values, because if you want to work with Huawei and RadarOS, set 3 on RadarOS to work. If you want to use RadarOS with Juniper, just set up 0 on RadarOS and it will work. But if you want to run both at the same time, you can specify 2 different values on the instance. Okay, so we think about, okay, what does it say, the RFC? So what it should be, IS-IS areas max parameters. Okay, starting to read the RFC, also all the updating about the original one, we discovered that they state only one small phrase, it should match. We said, okay, so Radar OS implementation is right, because usually people say, oh, Radar OS, it's a toy, it's a blah, 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 it don't work, it's cheap. But if it just should match, it's okay. They are accepting a value and going out the same value. So it seemed at the first look that Radar OS implementation is correct against the RFC. But what about the other vendors? And looking in depth, we found another RFC, very, very recent, where is recommendation of interoperable networks using intermediate system to intermediate system, so IS-IS. There is a paragraph, 3.2, maximum area addresses. But here is a recommendation. So the first recommendation is, the first one is a common practice. So it's not to follow. A common practice is for an implementation to use the value of 3. Therefore, an implementation that only supports 3 can expect to interoperate successfully with other systems. But it's not true with Juniper in this case. If you put 3, it will not work. They need 0. But also specify the same ISO that an advertisement value of 0 is treated as equivalent to 3. And that checking the value for consistency may be omitted if an implementation only supports the value of 3. It makes sense with the first statement. So an implementation should use the values 3 and should check if it's equal, if it's different. So if this is not 0 or 3, it must discard the PDO. Okay, how we solve our lab. We had another chance, 10 is very horrible solution, but it worked. We create 2 separate instances on IS-IS, one with areas max 0, the other one 3, one versus Juniper, the other to Huawei, and redistributing the routes that are really horrible for one single network, but it worked. This is not a suggestion, it's just a workaround that it worked. And I wrote to MikroTik to hear them because we did not have an experience with Cisco. We did not have expensive Cisco device to test interoperability with this brand. This is why we used Huawei and Juniper, 2 brands that are in the same market range of MikroTik, almost. But it seemed that all the vendors did something against the ISO or RFC. And my idea is that they copy Cisco, they probably implemented, but we have no proof about that. We didn't try for now. And something just copied the implementation. And I don't know if in Radar OS we will need a checkbox like this one, Cisco style, that will accept 0 and 3, going out 3. So it will be like the other vendors. And so if one day you have to run IS-IS with more than one vendor, you know what will happen, but with just one of them, we just work very smooth. Thank you. Any question? No one is, yes, we have one.
Is it actually a workaround to redistribute routes? Because the reasons why you have IS-IS or OSPF is to have, I mean, usually in the core is to have LSDB, which you will use for traffic engineering, like to build RSVP tunnels, so you rely on information. But then if you are redistributing routes, it means that you have 2 different link state database, and you cannot really use proper traffic engineering when doing redistribution.
Yeah. Never tried with traffic engineering for now, using just running in simple installation with IGP protocol between BGP, and just to connect internal segment routing in a network, and that's it. Other questions?
I want to ask you, can we redistribute IS-IS roads to another routing protocols?
I don't remember. Usually, yes. Usually, you can distribute protocols in other protocols, in other OS. I don't remember if you can do that right now. We can just control after. Yes, there was an update 2 releases ago
yes,
on
but
IS-IS.
only in the command line interface. If
Yes,
I
of course.
remember well, but I really...
It's still on the command line, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now